The slap echoed through the room like a gunshot, freezing every guest where they stood. A uniformed hand tightened around a young woman's throat, pushing her back as phones lifted and recorded the unthinkable. No warning, no reason. Just power being abused in the open, at a party that was supposed to be safe. And as dozens watched, helpless and stunned, no one could have imagined who was already on the way or how everything was about to change in a single moment. What happens when the wrong person thinks they can get away with anything? Comment and tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe for more powerful stories. Jada Johnson stepped out of the rideshare car just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the upscale neighborhood. It was supposed to be a simple night out, a chance to breathe, to laugh, to forget the pressure of constantly having to prove herself in spaces where she was too often overlooked or underestimated. She smoothed the red dress she'd chosen for the evening, feeling a rare spark of excitement. Tonight wasn't about work, responsibilities, or expectations. It was about showing up for a friend and allowing herself to feel normal for once. Marcus Brooks, the host of the birthday party, had spared no expense. His family's home stretched across the lawn like something from a magazine, white columns, manicured gardens, and soft music drifting out the open doors. Guests filtered in and out, laughing over drinks, moving with an ease Jada rarely felt in circles like these. Still, she reminded herself that she belonged here. She'd been invited. She'd worked hard her entire life to stand confidently in any room, no matter who questioned her place in it. Inside, warm lights glowed across polished floors as catering staff drifted by with trays of food and champagne. Jasmine Williams and Tyler Rodriguez joined her quickly, their energy lifting her spirits even more. For a while, everything felt right. Good people, good music, and the rare relief of being seen for who she truly was. But not everyone in the room saw her that way. Near the kitchen, an off-duty officer named Derek Walsh watched her with a gaze that clung too long, too deliberately. A man used to throwing his weight around. A man who had decided without knowing anything about her that she didn't fit the picture of who should be here. Jada felt the shift in the air, a quiet warning, a tension that crept in slowly, hinting that this night, meant to be an escape, was about to take a turn she could never have prepared for. For the first hour, the night moved smoothly. Jada drifted between conversations, letting the warm atmosphere calm her nerves. But every now and then she felt a presence, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Derek Walsh's stare followed her from room to room, tracking her like a shadow she hadn't invited. He stood near the kitchen doorway, the brim of his police union cap tilted low, a half-finished beer dangling from his fingers. The way he watched her wasn't casual, wasn't accidental. It was calculated. A silent message delivered from across the room. "You don't belong here." Jada tried to shake it off. She focused on Jasmine's jokes, Tyler's stories, and the music pulsing softly through the walls. But underneath it all, unease lingered. It was the kind of feeling she'd learned to trust, because ignoring it often meant trouble. When she stepped into the kitchen to refill her water, the room grew quiet. She was alone, except for him. Walsh pushed off the counter and blocked the doorway with casual arrogance, as if the space belonged to him and she was trespassing. He didn't say anything at first. He didn't need to. His posture said everything. Jada kept her voice steady, her expression neutral. She had faced men like him before, men who believed a badge, even off-duty, gave them power over anyone they decided was less. She simply walked past him, refusing to let fear show. But the moment she rejoined the party, she saw him step into the hallway, phone pressed to his ear, eyes locked on her like she was already a suspect. A chill spread across her skin. Minutes later, flashing blue and red lights painted the windows. Two police cruisers pulled into the driveway, tires crunching on the stone path. Conversations died instantly. Music faded into silence. Guests exchanged confused looks. No one had called for help. No one except the man who'd been waiting for this moment. Walsh greeted the responding officers with the confidence of someone who believed the system existed to protect him alone. His tone was low, but Jada caught pieces of it. Suspected narcotics, matching a description, probable cause. Her stomach tightened. She knew what was happening. Inside the living room, eyes turned toward her, slowly at first, then all at once, when Officer Barrett pointed directly in her direction. The order came next, a firm command to step outside. The shift in the room was immediate. Jada felt dozens of eyes follow her as she moved through the parted crowd. Not one person spoke. Not one person intervened. Fear held the room hostage. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. The officer positioned himself between her and the door, reciting accusations rooted in nothing but Walsh's lies. She answered calmly, pointing out the lack of evidence, the lack of reason, but Walsh stepped forward out of the shadows, eager to escalate. His version of the story became more elaborate with each sentence, building falsehoods as quickly as he drained his beer. When she called him out, she saw something flare in his eyes, anger at being challenged, fury at being exposed. Then his hand clamped around her wrist, a hard squeeze, a tightening grip, a deliberate assertion of dominance. Jada kept her voice firm, controlled, refusing to give him the satisfaction of fear. She repeated her rights, stated the law, demanded justification. With each word she spoke, his grip hardened. It wasn't about law anymore. It was about power. The handcuffs came next, metal biting into her skin, cutting off circulation as guests watched helplessly from the windows. She stood tall despite the pain, insisting she wasn't resisting, insisting she knew what he was doing. Walsh didn't care. He forced her toward his personal truck, a violation so blatant it drew gasps from the crowd. When she struggled to stay balanced, he swept her legs out. Concrete tore into her knees. Blood stained the crushed gravel beneath her. Phones recorded everything. And still, he shoved the accusation back at her, convinced he could twist reality to match his story. But Jada knew something he didn't. Help was already on the way. Jada stood trembling but unbroken, blood sliding slowly down her knees, the cold bite of metal cutting deeper into her wrists. Walsh towered over her with the smug certainty of someone who believed the world existed to validate him. He barked orders, pushed her toward his truck, and struck her across the face when she refused to climb inside. The sound of that slap didn't just crack through the air, it ruptured the night. Phones lifted higher. Gasps spread across the driveway. Even the officers beside him froze for a split second, startled by how boldly he crossed the line. But Walsh didn't waver. If anything, the challenge only fueled him. He insisted she was resisting, insisted she was dangerous, insisted she needed to be taken downtown. But then, far down the street, a low rumble interrupted his tirade. Engines, several of them, smooth, steady, and powerful. Walsh paused, annoyance flickering across his face as bright headlights washed over the scene. But the moment he saw the formation, motorcycles first, followed by a fleet of black subs, his expression collapsed. The first vehicle rolled up with the unmistakable presence of government authority. Then came a second, then a third. A hush fell across the crowd. Security agents stepped out, forming a perimeter without saying a word. Their movements were flawless, precise, practiced, unnerving in the calm confidence they carried. Then the door of the lead SUV opened, and the governor of Georgia emerged. Patricia Johnson walked toward her daughter with a stillness that carried more power than shouting ever could. Her tailored suit, her posture, her stare, nothing about her presence asked for authority. It commanded it. She knelt briefly beside Jada, brushing blood from her cheek with a tenderness that made the entire crowd fall silent. Then she stood and turned toward Officer Walsh. What followed wasn't noise. It was silence sharpened into a weapon. The governor dismantled his lies with a precision he didn't know how to counter. She demanded badge numbers, evidence, justification. She revealed his history, complaints buried, cases dismissed, victims ignored. Each word hit him harder than any physical blow. Walsh's confidence evaporated. His hands shook. Sweat gathered at his temples. His face lost every shade of control as the truth closed in around him. And then, in front of dozens of witnesses, his panic reached a breaking point. A dark stain spread down his uniform pants, first one leg, then the other. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the officer who had tried to humiliate a young black woman now stood humiliated himself, shaking, collapsing onto the curb, his career and reputation dissolving in real time. No one laughed, no one cheered. They simply watched as the man who misused his power finally faced a force he couldn't intimidate. Backup officers arrived moments later, not for Jada but for him. Handcuffs clicked behind his back, the same ones he had tightened on her. And as they lifted him to his feet, the crowd realized the night had shifted. Justice, long delayed, often denied, was finally moving. But the consequences of this moment were only just beginning. As the patrol car carrying Derek Walsh disappeared into the night, the atmosphere around Jada slowly shifted. The applause faded, conversations dimmed, and the weight of everything that had happened began to catch up with her. Blood still clung to her knees, her wrists burned from the cuffs, and the sting on her cheek remained. But she stood taller now, supported by her mother, her friends, and a crowd that had witnessed the truth unfold. Governor Patricia Johnson stayed by her side as medical staff cleaned her wounds. Her voice was steady, calm, unwavering, as if holding her daughter together by will alone. And for the first time that night, Jada allowed herself to breathe. Not because the pain was gone, but because she had survived something meant to break her. In the days that followed, the world reacted. Footage from the party spread across the internet, sparking outrage far beyond the neighborhood where it happened. News outlets analyzed every second. Communities marched. Lawmakers were forced to respond. What had been a private celebration had become a public reckoning, proof that injustice doesn't require a dark alley or an empty street. Sometimes it happens in front of 50 people and still needs a camera to be believed. Walsh faced charges, real ones this time. Investigations reopened. Victims came forward. The system that had once shielded him finally had to answer for the lives it ignored. And Jada, once just a young woman trying to enjoy a night out, became something she never expected, a symbol of accountability. Not because she asked for it, but because she refused to stay silent when silence was the easiest choice. Her story reminded thousands, maybe millions, that racism isn't always hidden. Sometimes it wears a uniform. Sometimes it stands in a doorway and decides who belongs. And sometimes it underestimates the strength of the person it tries to break. So the question is this: how many more lives must be shaken before we demand a world where justice isn't a privilege, but a guarantee? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And make sure you subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and our community's fight to be seen. And don't forget to hit that like button. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.